It's clear to me that a majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance. They watch his presidency get stymied by relentless resistance, and they see Democrats using lawfare this day to attack him. Well, I've had disagreements with Donald Trump, such as on the coronavirus pandemic and his elevation of Anthony Fauci. Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear, a repackaged form of warmed-over corporatism that Nikki Haley represents. The days of putting Americans last, of kowtowing to large corporations, of caving to woke ideology are over.
All right, folks, breaking news, emergency video, because this is the last news that I expected to be covering today. But we just got the announcement as of about an hour ago that Ron DeSantis has officially and kind of suddenly, right, dropped out of the presidential race, suspended his campaign, and immediately will be endorsing Donald Trump. Now, in fairness, I always knew this was coming at some point. A lot of people didn't believe me. I know we have the hardcore DeSantis people who absolutely can't stand Trump, and they would always say, he's never getting behind Trump, and I'm not going to vote for Trump, and none of us are. And I always said, look, maybe that's how you personally feel. I never felt that it was how DeSantis feels, right? DeSantis and Trump definitely have some differences, but I think deep down, you know, Ron never had this burning hatred of Trump that I think a lot of his supporters did. But I said 3 days ago on Twitter, I said, I wonder how Twitter will react when DeSantis eventually endorses Trump in the end. That will be a sight to witness. And of course, people came to me saying that's never going to happen. Of course, I always thought it would happen because deep down, I always felt that's how DeSantis really was kind of feeling about it. But I will say I was not expecting that news to come just 3 or 4 days later. Okay, so he will not even be taking a shot at the New Hampshire or South Carolina primaries. In fairness, it never looked good for him in terms of a path to victory, especially after Iowa. That's the state where he put all of his chips into and didn't even crack like 30%, right? But it's still surprising because he was campaigning on Fox News this whole week. He was still doing events. And so I definitely think the fact that this was coming is not surprising. The fact that this came so soon, however, is surprising. But like sort of I think Vivek Ramaswamy was trying to do after Iowa, this may be a tactical decision to say, well, look, the best thing for all of us is if I try to repair a relationship with Trump and get behind him. And the sooner we do that, maybe the sooner we can get over this beef and come together, right? So maybe that's what's behind it. It could also be because of the fact that the campaign is running out of money per a lot of reports, or the fact that, you know, New Hampshire, South Carolina, he's polling pretty terribly in both of those states. So you want to just, I guess, avoid the embarrassment. I don't know. Regardless, let's react, folks, to the video where Ron DeSantis announces he is dropping out. And I will tell you what I think the future of DeSantis looks like, because, you know, I know there's a lot of beef. There's a lot of bad blood between this primary and, hey, he betrayed Trump. I still think the guy has a lot to offer. And I think that him working together with Trump alongside Vivek could be a very good trio in a way I'll explain in a second. But first, let's just listen to what DeSantis has to say and why he dropped out.
Greetings from Florida. The warmth of being home is a reminder why I've chosen public service. From joining the United States Navy and serving in Iraq, to representing the people in the U.S. Congress, and now serving as governor of Florida. And it reminds me why I decided to run for president, to fight for those who've been forgotten in this country. This is America's time for choosing. We can choose to allow a border invasion, or we can choose to stop it. We can choose reckless borrowing and spending, or we can choose to limit government and lower inflation. We can choose political indoctrination, or we can choose classical education. These choices are symptoms of the underlying struggle to ensure that constitutional government can endure and that Western civilization can survive. And we launched this campaign to bring accountability to government, regain sovereignty at our border, and restore sanity to our society. We cannot succeed as a country if we allow our nation to be invaded, our currency to be debased, our cities to crumble, and our kids to be indoctrinated. The DC elites who facilitated this mess do not care about you, and they do not work for you. They work for themselves. They seek to accumulate power at your expense to pursue an agenda that is harmful to the American people. Citizens do not serve politicians. It is the duty of politicians to serve you. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. Reversing the decline of this nation requires leadership that delivers big results for the people we are elected to serve. I have a record of leading with conviction, championing an agenda marked by bold colors, delivering on my promises, and defeating the people who are responsible for our nation's decline. That is the type of leadership we need for all of America.
By the way, let me just pause there and say I agree with that, right? Now, in terms of his campaign, I thought it was a miscalculation in some ways. I thought that it just either it wasn't run that well or he just didn't have the it factor to make it in this race. But still, regardless, it is true, right? He's been a very effective governor in Florida. And that's why, and I'll talk about this in a little bit after we finish reacting to this video, but that's why I say I don't actually have hard feelings toward the guy. I think in many ways he was kind of manipulated and misled, maybe by some worse people who, you know, just wanted to get rid of Trump and saw him as a vehicle. Maybe he was manipulated in some ways, but I still think the guy has a lot to offer. I still appreciate what he did as governor of Florida and still, I guess, is hopefully in the future going to do. But whatever, we'll talk about that in a second.
Now, over the past many months, Casey and I have traveled across the country to deliver a message of hope that decline is a choice and that we can, in fact, succeed again as a nation. Nobody worked harder, and we left it all out on the field. Now, following our second place finish in Iowa, we've prayed and deliberated on the way forward. If there was anything I could do to produce a favorable outcome, more campaign stops, more interviews, I would do it. But I can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory. Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign. I'm proud to have delivered on 100% of my promises, and I will not stop now. It's clear to me that a majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance. They watch his presidency get stymied by relentless resistance, and they see Democrats using lawfare this day to attack him. Well, I've had disagreements with Donald Trump, such as on the coronavirus pandemic and his elevation of Anthony Fauci. Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear, a repackaged form of warmed-over corporatism that Nikki Haley represents. The days of putting Americans last, of kowtowing to large corporations, of caving to woke ideology are over. I thank all of our passionate supporters who have stood by us through it all. That we had people volunteer to come to Iowa in the middle of a blizzard to knock on doors and make phone calls touched us dearly. No candidate had more thrown at him, but no candidate had so many committed volunteers and staff. Finally, I want to thank my wife, Casey, and our kids, Madison, Mason, and Mamie. Casey's gone far above and beyond in her support for our campaign and for our cause. She's not only a great wife and mother, she's a great American who cares deeply about the future of the country that our kids will inherit. Our kids have seen and done a lot on the trail, from playing on the famed Field of Dreams baseball site in Iowa to making their first snowman in New Hampshire. They are one of the reasons we fight so hard for what we believe in. Winston Churchill once remarked that success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. While this campaign has ended, the mission continues. Down here in Florida, we will continue to show the country how to lead. Thank you, and God bless.
So there you have it. I actually have a lot of respect for DeSantis for doing this. I think it was a mature decision, right? Not just the choice to drop out. Maybe you could argue that was practical, but I think the choice to endorse Donald Trump certainly, and by the way, bash Nikki Haley while doing so, right? He could have kept which again, I think is overplayed in the public eye. I think privately, I don't know if it's that strong, at least on Ron DeSantis' side. But he could have tried to get behind Nikki Haley to consolidate, oh, we're going to stop Trump. But he realizes, and I hope this is something that the hardcore DeSantis people realize, is that DeSantis and Trump agree on 90% of things. And for the most part, in terms of political issues, right? I think most Trump and DeSantis supporters agree on 90% of things. I think they may vastly disagree in terms of strategy or practicality, right? I think that is really what differentiated the DeSantis and Trump campaign, is like, what style of leadership do you want? What type of political strategy or electoral strategy do you want? But when it really came down to the core issues, their campaigns, if you actually read the platforms, are not all that different. Okay. And so here is my message. It's the same message as DeSantis, is the same message that Vivek gave when he dropped out, which is, folks, if we agree on 90% of things, and I'm speaking right now to the hardcore DeSantis supporters that I'm sure many of you see on Twitter who are saying, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump, I can't stand him. They're just scorned. They're just bitter. They're just being emotional. Folks, we do not have time for petty politics. We really don't. We don't have time for immature or childish games. We have a country to fix, okay? And if Donald Trump is going to be the nominee, I'm not even, honestly, frankly, folks, I'm done making the case as to why Trump even should be the nominee. It's an inevitability at this point. So what do we do about it, okay? And the way I see it, we have a country to fix. None of us want to see 4 more years of Joe Biden. So, and if we agree on most issues, and we all mutually, the camps of all 3 campaigns also agree, we don't want any more Republicans like Nikki Haley, then what's the issue here? Okay, there is no logical reason to not all come together at this point. Again, all it has to do is petty politics and beef and just being scorned. And again, I give a lot of props to DeSantis because he could follow that lead and go down that route, or he could have waited to endorse Trump and say, no, I'm going to hold out until he apologizes to me or something like that, which is sort of more or less what Ted Cruz did in 2016, right? He sort of sat out for a while and then eventually got behind Trump. But DeSantis just says, no, we all got to come together. This is what we got to do. And again, massive respect. And I think, I don't know what his political future looks like, but genuinely, again, I think he has things to offer, and I hope he has some type of political future. I don't know if that's as a future president, but I hope to see that. Okay. Now, let me say this. Now, I just spoke to the hardcore DeSantis people who are like, I'll never get behind Trump. Let me now also speak to the hardcore Trump people who will say, we can't let DeSantis back into our ranks. He's a Brutus. He's a Judas. He's a traitor. You know, we can't deal with that. Okay. Let's be real about this. All right. The guy, yes, ran a primary challenge. Okay. And, you know, maybe there's a sense of disloyalty there. I don't know. I would also point out at the same time that I know DeSantis tried to take certain shots at Trump for political purposes because he was trying to win. But I don't think DeSantis necessarily ran for president to try to usurp Donald Trump. It was more that, like, he thought he had something to offer that was better than Trump. He, you know, like I said, maybe was influenced by some bad or manipulative people that convinced him to go down this route of a, you know, what was at certain points, right, sort of an embarrassing campaign. But still, regardless, okay, Trump has settled his beef with a lot of different people over the years. At this point, frankly, who cares? Here's what I see in Ron DeSantis. And frankly, you know, I maybe I deserve credit, man. I'm just saying, because my opinion on DeSantis has not changed through this primary cycle. I've said I don't think it's his time. I don't necessarily know if he has the it factor to ever really be a president, but he was a very effective governor in the state of Florida. He got a lot of important things done. I think he started a very important thing in the conservative movement, which is this idea of sort of the strongman, no nonsense governor, right? Because obviously, you know, federal politics is very hard to change on either side. So what we need to do in red states is try to make them as conservative as possible. DeSantis deserves credit for all of those things. But here's what I see more than anything is that who is Ron DeSantis? He's an executor. Not in that sense, but in the he gets stuff done. He's a doer, right? And I think that type of mentality, that type of skill set, the sort of polished statesman, it can be very effective to Trump, obviously on the campaign, just to bring the DeSantis supporters in. I also, though, think that it's important that Trump and DeSantis now reconcile and come together, because I could see a policy-based role for DeSantis in a future Trump White House. I don't know. People have floated an idea like attorney general or secretary of something. I don't know, frankly. That's for them to work out later. I'm just saying that I see the potential there. And now, when you take a look at the fact that DeSantis sort of listened to Vivek's advice, I don't know if he did it because of Vivek, but you know what I mean. You now have this trio or these two people behind Trump that are vastly different. Okay, because think about this for a second. Vivek Ramaswamy, who is he? He's the visionary. He's the visionary. He's the revolutionary. One could argue maybe he's the idealist in some sense. And I think you need that on your team. You need the dreamer. You need the guy who says, why can't we get it done? Or here's the bold new ideas of the future. Okay, that's Vivek on one side. He's now behind Trump. On the other side, I think you have something that was maybe missing before this, which is, like I said, DeSantis, the effective executor, right? He's not the visionary. He's not the dreamer, but he's the doer. Okay, he's the doer. He says, tell me what to do or tell me vaguely what you want. I'll make sure it gets done. I think that kind of dynamic duo working together behind Trump and maybe in a future Trump White House in some capacity could be incredibly effective. I think you need both of those voices. You need both of those people behind your campaign. And that's why I've always said, I was saying this before the Iowa caucus, I'll say it again. It is so important that Trump and DeSantis come together and reconcile. Again, not just for electoral purposes, which I frankly, I think most DeSantis supporters will eventually get behind Trump. You have this cult on Twitter who's basically just anti-Trumpers, but I don't think that's most DeSantis voters. I think most DeSantis voters, maybe they preferred DeSantis because they saw him as more electable or more effective, which is fine, right? Like I said, that's not a political disagreement. That's a strategic disagreement. We can get over that. But beyond the election, right? I think DeSantis could get some very important things good that are done, get them done for Trump, whereas Vivek, I think, can propose some very good ideas to Trump. And you see how that pipeline works from the vision to the execution of the vision. Again, I think this team is actually very, very important. Okay. So, I'd have to imagine maybe the reason it happened so fast is maybe that phone call has already been made. I don't know how easy it's going to be for them to come back together. I don't know if Trump trusts DeSantis. I don't know if DeSantis trusts Trump. I know I've seen a lot of Trump people saying we can't trust him again. But, again, my defense of that is when you look at what Ron DeSantis did in this campaign, yes, you could argue to some degree it was disloyal for him to even try to run against Trump. Okay, fair enough. But I would also say on the flip side, he didn't run a Chris Christie campaign. He actually tried to talk as little about Donald Trump as possible. Now, eventually, when he saw that strategy wasn't working, he tried to feed some lines about Trump, and he did say some things about like January 6th that I thought were a little bit annoying. But for the most part, overall, like I don't see that in what Ron DeSantis tried to do in his campaign, So anyways, that's besides the point. I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but be sure to let me know what you guys think about this entire situation in the comment section down below. Do you think reconciliation is in order and is necessary? I think that's the big question now, as I've made the case for a long time. Okay. I think it needs to happen because I think ultimately Trump and DeSantis represent similar sides of the conservative movement. They sort of agree with the fact that like, we're done with the do nothing Republicans. We're done with the kind of corporate rule, right? Trump does so by being a populist, back in 2016. DeSantis stood up to Disney, which I know some people attack him for. I still defend him on that stuff, right? So there's no point in us working against each other at this point. Okay, there's no point to it. We all agree we don't want to see Nikki Haley. Vivek agrees on that. DeSantis agrees on that. Trump agrees on that. This is politics. Trump has gotten back with people who have been far worse towards him than DeSantis has in the past. I think that this needs to happen. Also, one last thing. Let me just say this. There are no hard feelings, at least for me. Okay, I don't speak for everyone. I know there's going to be a lot of dunking. There's going to be a lot of making fun of each other. It's the internet. It's politics. Welcome to planet Earth. That's how it goes. But in my eyes, That's not constructive. For me, there are no hard feelings towards Ron DeSantis or his supporters, at least the supporters who are mature enough to recognize the situation and will not be trying to help Joe Biden in November, okay? Because to those handful of people, no, you guys have serious issues. But besides that, there's no hard feelings, right? I think that I part of me watching this campaign almost felt bad for DeSantis, to tell you the truth, because I genuine, and again, this might be a controversial take with some people, but the way I see it, genuinely, I think deep down he's a good guy. I think he's trying to do his best. Okay. And again, when you look at a lot of his campaign platform, he wasn't exactly selling out to the liberals or the neocons with the vast majority of it. Now, I thought some of his stuff on foreign policy was a little shaky, but when it comes to domestic policy, if you actually read what DeSantis was campaigning on, which most people never heard because he was not an effective campaigner, and that's one of the things I pointed out, it was all pretty good, right? And you look at what he did as governor of Florida, I'm very grateful for it, actually. I came to school here as a big reason for that, right? The reason I'm actually in college here at UF is because it was one of the only places that was guaranteeing that they weren't going to have mask or vaccine mandates, and that's because of DeSantis. So, this is all just to say, there's nothing against the guy. I wish him the best. I hope he has a future spot in the Trump White House, or he finishes out as governor and he kind of finishes the job. Please fix the insurance rates, though, Ron. That's the one thing I will say about this state. Please bring down the price of insurance. But, other than that, I wish him the best. And I will continue. I've been consistent about it the whole time. I'll defend the things he does good. I'll criticize, when he was campaigning, I would criticize the things he was ineffective at. But the time for that has passed. It's time to come together and make America great again. It's true. With that said, folks, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Have a blessed and happy Sunday. And until next time, Alpha moves only. God bless. Have a very good day already, but that's what I always say. And peace.